Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at another example of the recent trend in ultralight, all-in-one, network-enabled digital mixers, the Soundcraft Ui-12. Previously, we looked at the QSC Touch Mix in a two-part review, which you can check out in the link below. While the Touch Mix is a completely standalone mixer, the Ui-12 falls into a slightly different category, in that it requires you to have a client, either a computer, tablet, or phone running a web browser connected in order to adjust any of the settings. The mixer will pass audio on its own, but beyond volume controls for left, right, and headphone outputs, you have no other access to controls. So with that in mind, let's take a look at how this mixer works in a real-world use case. First, let's talk about what you'll need to get up and running. I'm choosing the most budget-friendly options here to keep the overall setup cost in line with the mixer's low entry price. So first we need our client. For this you can use most any device that'll run HTML5 browser. I'm using an Acer C720 Chromebook as it's a very good and cheap browser option. I'm going to hardwire the network connection so I don't have to worry about losing control as Wi-Fi channels get swamped during an event. Now, neither my Chromebook nor my 2015 MacBook Pro have an RJ45 connector anymore, so I picked up this Anker USB 3 to RJ45 adapter hub, and it works flawlessly for this use. If you need one, check out the link in the description below. The next item I've found to be a critical accessory is a trackball mouse. Unfortunately, the implementation of the browser controls and how they interact with a touchpad mouse or a mouse like the Apple Magic Mouse that allows gestures and scrolling leaves quite a bit to be desired. Erratic, unpredictable controls are really common with the touchpads and this mixer, with gestures registering accidentally, often resulting in momentary loss of control or the browser reloading, generally just things you don't want to have happen by surprise. So we're recording through the Ui-12 and just going to give a brief look through the features here. So here's the main mixer panel. You can cycle through the other mixer panels, just your inputs, effects returns, subgroups, and aux masters here. This is set from a job I did the other day, a little broadcast job where I was feeding a feed to press mult and then to a camera directly. We get back out here and these are the meters so you can see where things are going right now. Left, right, auxes, subgroups, effects, line inputs, the playback from this USB built in, and then the 8 inputs here. Really handy to have a nice little overview of the whole situation. You can see where phantom power is applied, where phase reverse, mutes, things like that. Just a nice visualization overall, and that gives you, there's a look at your mute groups. Oops. Now that's the second time I've come across that failure mode, where clicking through that pane, it dumps the connection, so some sort of software bug there. But that's okay, we'll reload it, and it jumps right back on. So not the end of the world. But yeah, that's happened a couple times now. Yep, right there again. See, that's some sort of bug there. Okay. So we can go from our mix panel here into our gain panel. And this gives us access to the head amps. On our first two channels here, we can switch between a low impedance microphone input and a high impedance input for something like a guitar or an acoustic guitar or a bass guitar or a keyboard to plug directly in and take advantage of the Digitech Stompboxes that are built in. So that's a nice feature there, and I'll more about that in a minute. So this is your input trim, phantom power, phase reverse. You've got mute, solo, pan, and other than that, and then gain reduction down here if we have that operating, which is really nice to have a visual on the gain reduction. And then for each channel, inputs and outputs, you can do a few things. You can jump into edit mode, which I'll get into in a second, which is all the details about that channel. You can go into aux mode here and see what channels are sent to what auxes. That's very handy, aux 1, aux 2. And same thing for effects sends, the effects, reverb, delay, and chorus there. So those are our two other sends on fader or mix modes, our aux and effects. And a nice feature I'll go over really quickly just because it's such a handy feature. This unit has two auxes, aux 1 and 2, but if you're in a situation where you really need more than that, you can flip the headphone out here, these other two balanced connections from master solo to aux, and then we'll go back, so we can go back into our mix here. And you see aux 3 and 4 are now available. So this is a 4-aux mixer as long as you're okay with not having a headphone bus. And a workaround for that would be to use, say if you just needed the third aux, a workaround would be just to put it in this mode and then have a small headphone amp that you could make your own monitor mix or Q bus out of aux 4. So flexible, not ideal. It would be nice to have 4 auxes and a headphone bus, but hey, you know, pretty cool that it does that at all. That's very handy if you're in a jam. So again, on channels 1 and 2, you have these Digitech Stompbox effects. Not something I'm going to use. I'm looking at this from a standpoint of live sound and not so much as a singer-songwriter or guitar player. Not sure if these would be useful to somebody in that situation or practical to use, but that's not what this video is about. So let's get on to the stuff we'll use in live sound. EQ. Now I've used this on 2 broadcast gigs so far, both providing mixes to the built-in sound system in the different venues and also out to a broadcast feed and also raw output to just to a camera. The EQ in this is fantastic. It just sounds really good. It's really easy to work with. If you really want it to be easy, you can put it in easy mode, and that gives you just basically high, mid, and low, which is interesting. We'll reset that. Sorry, where we have 4 bands of fully parametric EQ. So you've got a high-pass filter, which is independent of the 4 bands here, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Easy to use. Pick your frequency, pick the width of your filter, and then plus or minus. Really handy feature for troubleshooting in the field is having the RTA. Very, very nice feature to have on every single channel, especially if you're operating in that 4 aux mode and you don't have your headphones. If you're trying to identify a problem, the RTA is really cool to have on board there. And then also a de-esser, which is just a frequency-dependent compressor. So you set this somewhere in the 6.3 range and set your threshold right, and you can get rid of some of the hissing and sizzle that certain people have in their voice naturally. So just overall a very nice, easy, accurate, decent sounding. I've had to make some pretty horrendous cuts and hacks with lavalier mics going through overhead ceiling speakers on one job, and it just sounded really good. It didn't sound overdone. It didn't sound over EQ'd or over processed. It was just in a nice smooth EQ that you'd expect from Soundcraft. I was very impressed to see how this compares to the Expression and Performer and other Soundcraft consoles I've used. And frankly, if those had this kind of user interface with the RTA and the de-esser built in, man, the Expression and the Performer could both benefit from this EQ interface hugely. This is, I think, the best EQ Soundcraft's ever done on a console, other than the VI series, other than the big boy stuff. Getting into dynamics, pretty much the same story over here. The interface is fantastic. The gate, I would like to see some more control over the gate. That's pretty much a one knob gate. I'd love to see more control over that just because I like gates. But again, for the price, it's got a gate. Hey, that's awesome. The compressor, something you're going to use much more often. I'll kick it in there, and that's with just a 3.6-to-1 ratio and an 8 millisecond attack. So you might be able to hear that. I'm not monitoring this back, but the compressor is super easy to use. It's very reasonable sounding. It's not harsh. It's not incredibly obvious sounding, but very useful for knocking down the peaks on something like a lectern mic. And also, I've had to employ it on the aux outputs with some light compression going to in-house systems and various other feeds to cameras, where we just need to make sure that we are within the acceptable range inputting to those destinations without risking clipping. Effect sends, every channel has the ability to send directly to reverb, delay, and chorus, and that's handy. And then you have aux sends from the channel view. So this is the channel-centric aux send. Depending on your workflow, this might make more sense to you, but this isn't generally how I work. I'm more of a fader flip kind of person than this view, but you know, to each their own. So that's it for a quick look at the features on the UI-12, but let's talk for a second about what it was like to actually use it. All right, so positive marks first. The portability factor. The ability to take a 12-channel mixer and stick it into my normal backpack and have tons of room left over for other stuff, be able to go out, jump on the train, and get to a quick job when somebody calls at the last minute is something that I've been wanting for a long time here living in the city. Audio. The quality of the audio from this mixer is what you would expect coming from a Soundcraft device. Absolutely usable in the scenarios I've tried it in so far. The outputs are quiet, no weird noises, so very easy to fit into your workflow alongside any other professional gear. The built-in EQ and compression are very powerful and very easy to use. And then the price, at under $300 for this thing, not including whatever you use to control it with, of course. For under $300, I think it's just a fantastic value. It's really hard to be critical of this mixer at all at that price point. To be fair though, this mixer does have a few shortcomings, but I think most of those could be addressed in future firmware or software updates, so I am hopeful for this platform's ability to progress and grow in the future with those updates. Speaking of firmware, one of the things that I've struggled with this mixer is trying to update it to the most recent firmware. I've followed the instructions step by step on the website, downloaded the latest version, and you get to the point where you put the USB stick into one of these ports. The unit recognizes that there is a USB stick, it pops up and says inserted, and then according to the instructions, it's supposed to then prompt you to do the update. And mine never does that. I've tried USB sticks of varying sizes. I've tried formatting them differently. I've tried everything. I've tried leaving the firmware package zipped as they suggest. I've tried unzipping it. I've tried all sorts of different stuff. At 11 o'clock Eastern time, they open. So I'm going to give them a call here in a few minutes and see if they can shed some light on what's going on with that. The control issue. I really hope they address this in a future software update. And maybe they already have in the version I'm trying to put on this right now, but not being able to use the trackpad or a mouse that does gestures because it's just so inconsistent. And that's obviously not something that's working correctly. So I really hope they fix that. I like the trackball mouse, but not everybody's going to want to carry a separate mouse. People are going to want to use their touchpad. Now we're getting into the nitpicky stuff. Test tone, something I've really missed coming from like the QSC Touch Mix or almost any other digital mixer that's out right now, is the ability to output a 1K tone or pink noise. Either one of those would be acceptable. It'd be nice to have both, but I use those on every job. Obviously, I can get around it. I have an app for my iPhone that I just put through the line input and, you know, tone generator, no big deal. But it would be nice to have it built in. It's just always nice not to have to pull out another device. Obviously, I'm gonna connect an iPad or a computer or phone to that line input anyway for playback most likely, but it'd be really nice to have that built in. Output delay. I know not everybody uses it, but if they could somehow make a version of the UI-12 that was geared more towards live sound use and less towards live music use, I would find that incredibly interesting. I would gladly trade the Stompbox features and the feedback suppression for all 4 auxes working, plus headphones and maybe output delay and a test tone generator. A mixer like that in this size package would be really interesting, and it'd just be really nice to have a mixer that felt like it was designed for live sound people. I know that isn't their market for this. They're expecting bands and singer-songwriters and musicians to buy this, but you're going to attract some live sound engineers that aren't going to use a lot of these extra features, but could really use a few other ones. So I don't know if that's something they could do with a software revision or what it could be, but it'd be really nice to see something like this from them with those features. So would I recommend the UI-12? For this price, I'd absolutely recommend it. It's not perfect, but it does represent a new way of thinking and a new direction in how we interact with audio at this price point which is pretty impressive. Obviously, this kind of technology has been out for a number of years. This unit itself is 2 years old. These have been out for 2 years now. And it's interesting to see where they're going with this and how this kind of interaction with consoles over a web browser might be implemented in future versions of their bigger products. So I'd absolutely recommend it. So I bought this one and I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to live with it, use it, and see how I get on with it in the future. And I'll do another video in the coming months and let you know how things go, if I was able to get that firmware updated, and what other things go on as I continue to put this mixer out on jobs. So that's it for this time. Be sure to follow the affiliate links down below if you need more information on any of the gear shown in this episode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.